coach Tarek.
And I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Paul.
We are your movement experts, and we are here to educate health and fitness professionals with the tools to create real change for and within the industry. Check out FTI's latest offer, which is 15% off of any of our online courses. Simply go to www.functionaltraininginstitute.com and input PDM15 at cart checkout. Hey Vanessa, I heard you had a great chat with Bobby Cappuccio. How did that all go?
Thanks, Tarek. Yes. I am very lucky to have time to sit with that incredible mind and that incredible man. Not in that particular order, in any particular order is great. The fascinating thing about Bobby is that I feel like I could ask him the same questions a few years apart. And not only does he reference the most new studies and research, but he also hones in on the most practical and easily explained methods of what he believes to be good coaching practice and the philosophies behind it. It's so incredible listening to him, and I've been fascinated by his mind ever since I first met him, which was years and years ago now. And every time I get to interview him, I feel really lucky because I always learn so much, and the depth that he goes into is incredible.
It really is. I sat into a mentorship with you in the sunny coast, and
that
was incredible. Just his energy when he's presenting, and his focus, and he's meticulous, methodical, but also energetic as well, you know. And was there anything specific that you guys covered off in the conversation?
We went through a lot, I'm not going to lie.
Imagine. A few specifics.
I think the thing that you specifically would love, Tarek, as well as you, our listener, he wants to see coaching as a more important aspect of the health and fitness industry. And he talks about really what makes a great coach and why coaching is integral to being able to run your fitness business. But not only the fitness business side of it, the questions that you can ask yourself as a human when you understand those principles of coaching, I think really help us to understand the human experience so much better. It helps me become a better person. It helps me become a better partner, a better daughter, a better everything. Like the information that we cover, not only does it help that aspect of coaching, but it helps you understand human relationships. And I think that that's just so important in general, just so that we can thrive.
Well, I can't wait to listen to this amazing interview.
Yes. So strap in. It's coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another episode of Purpose Driven Movement. I'm Vanessa, your host for today, and I am really excited because I have with me one of my favorite humans in the fitness industry, Bobby Cappuccio. Hello, welcome.
Vanessa, thank you for having me. I have to admit, like 50% of my motivation for being on the podcast is I get to hang out with you and chat to you. So,
yay. That's a really big motivation for me as well. And I've been really lucky because we've known each other for a long time, and I get to say that I've been influenced quite a lot by what you've done in the industry and your teachings. So when we started this, I knew I wanted to get you on here. So I just love the way that your brain works. It's so interesting. And I'm going to just fire questions at you. Now, people don't know that you don't know what the questions are going to be. So this is purely like really just letting you go for it today.
I'll just like default to like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The answer is 42. That's the answer to absolutely everything. Very short podcast. But what's the question? That's the conundrum, right? The answer, 42. But what's the question? Anyway, half the audience got that. Half the audience is like, okay, this guy's interesting.
All right, let's do the first question then, shall we? Okay. If you could change one thing about the health and fitness industry instantly, no ramifications, what would be the thing that you would change?
I think the problem that is created here, that the change would be seeking to solve, is created mostly by people with the very best intentions. People get into the fitness industry not because they have a long history. It's almost like, well, my dad was an attorney and his dad was an attorney. So there's this like family heritage and you're expected to pick up the family mantle and become an attorney. No, you don't have multi-generational personal training. It just doesn't happen. The fitness industry is too much in its infancy. So what you have is people who have gotten into this industry because they have a strong personal, emotional attachment They have experienced something deeply profound and in many cases transformational as a result of getting into fitness. And we run into a situation where often we want change for our clients, even more than they might want it for themselves. And that is altruistic, it's well-meaning, but sometimes it's not constructive. So the one change that I would make is a true focus on coaching. And I'm just going to simplify it by where we focus more on what we want to draw out of people rather than what we are committed to putting into them. People are not lacking something. Yes, they do need resources to be more resourceful. Yes, they do need information. But it's almost like, oh, if this person was a little bit more like us and a little bit less like them, well, they would have the attributes and the characteristics to bridge the gap between where they are now and where they want to be, or who they are now and who and what they say they ultimately want to become. That's not true. If you look at most of your clients, they have done extraordinary things in their life. They might be just struggling with this particular area. And I think coaching in a lot of ways is the solve for that problem. It's not an expeditious solve. It's one that requires deep immersion and developments of skill sets, like anything else anybody listening to this has already done in any other area. But that's my answer.
That's a pretty epic answer. I really like that. And funnily enough, you led perfectly into what I was going to ask next, and that was a complete accident. I don't know how that happened. But so you're talking about trainers need to become coaches. So how do we start bridging that gap? You know, like you said, most trainers are well-intentioned. So where do we start to shift the paradigm?
Well, first of all, I think we need a working definition of what does coaching mean? Because a lot of times we use the term coaching interchangeably with training, and they are both highly valuable. They are in no way the same thing. You can take coaching-based practices out onto the fitness floor just as you could take training-based practices, but you're never a hybrid of a coach or training. Even if it's like only in 5-minute increments, you're either coaching or you're doing something else. You got to know exactly which domain you're working in and why. And then from there, you get into coaching the same way you get into anything else. If using our attorney example, if you want to get into law, you typically go to law school and you learn very specific disciplines and the fundamentals of law that allow you to operate in whatever domain of law you're seeking to get into. You want to be a doctor, you go to medical school. You want to be a personal trainer, you go ahead and you get certified, and then you get advanced specialization certifications, and you study, you apply things successfully, you make mistakes, you reflect, you modify your approach, and you learn from the mistakes that you're making. It's the same thing with coaching. So I think we understand how to do that. We need a working definition. When we say I'm coaching somebody, what exactly do you mean by that?
That's a really interesting question that completely hurt my brain. And now I'm thinking about it really on a personal level as well. Well, the challenge is that we enter in with our clients or with people at the gym, and we can sometimes have those kind of deeper conversations where they'll tell us about their struggles and we listen and maybe try to offer some suggestions. But 9 times out of 10, what the client is looking for is also a training session. What are the client's expectations matching what's happening in the industry as well? Or is there a whole need to completely revamp the message of the industry so that clients have a better understanding of what they can expect from training and coaching?
I'm hesitant to ever say that we need to revamp the entirety of anything, because what that suggests is that fundamentally what we are doing in the fitness industry is broken. And if you look into a couple of areas that operate within quote unquote fitness, you can say that. And that is a fair criticism. But if that's true, what else is true? There are also things that we do in the fitness industry that are not broken. They work very well. It's just a matter of what do they work well with. So if you go to a restaurant and you have a starter and you really love your starter, you're not going to say, okay, well, let's get rid of whole mains. Main courses are so 2019. Let's just now just do all starters and tapas. That's like where you pay a lot for very small portions of food. That's my own personal complaint. but that says a lot about my personality type. The two of them go hand in hand. This works. This is good. What would go well with it for who and for what goal? Because if you're a carpenter and you say, well, carpentry is about utilizing hammers. Hammers are great. Got no problem with hammers, but a hammer is not the tool for everything. What are the combination of tools you need? For what purpose? When do you use them? How do you use them in combination with one another? That, I think, I don't know, I've never been a carpenter, but that falls into the essentials of carpentry. And it's the same thing here. We do three things in the fitness industry. One thing we do is we train people. And by train people, we bridge the gap between what I would call knowledge of performance and knowledge of results. There's something that we're ideally looking to have happen based on the client's goals, needs, wants, and abilities. And then there's what's actually happening given their goals, needs, wants, and abilities. And what we're doing is we're giving micro cues within the duration of an execution of an exercise and around the execution of an exercise to bridge that gap between the ideal, which it's just a compass. I'm not saying literally there's any such thing as a perfect anything when you're dealing with bioindividuality, but it is a compass, and then there's what's actually happening, and you're helping the client to kind of like narrow that chasm. That is extremely valuable, and that falls into, when we say training, you could also say instructing. Then there's teaching, and teaching is when we purposely give information with the intention that that client will execute on that information. They will try to, not necessarily in front of us on the gym floor. Like, we give information not on prescribing diets for people, but generalized information about healthy food choices. What's the difference between one food versus another? We don't really want you to eat in front of us. We'd really prefer that you didn't, actually. You're going to come back and say, okay, I've used this. This is what happened. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. And from there, that's how we layer in the next lesson. Teaching is critical. Now, the commonality with these two factors of instruction or training, if you will, is that they're highly directive. Coaching is non-directive. Again, it's drawing out rather than putting in. It's allowing someone through their own introspective processes to identify discrepancies between current behaviors, desired outcomes. It's allowing them to recognize wins and build self-efficacy. And it's also allowing them to work within the uncomfortable zone of ambivalence, where they might want two things that are in conflict with one another, and that creates either resistance or discord. How I would define resistance versus discord is, I'm resisting something because if I achieve this, if I get what I want here, what do I have to sacrifice in another place? And what is the value appraisal of what I'm sacrificing versus what I'm gaining? So I want to be more fit, and I want to have greater energy levels, and I want to have greater longevity because I want to do things with my family that creates memories. But every time I'm in the gym, I'm away from the family. That's the entire undercurrent and motivational driver behind my goal in the first place. So I'm getting what I want at the expense of what I really, really want. And that thing that I'm sacrificing might be a higher value proposition. So I am sacrificing a higher value for the pursuit of a lower level of supporting value in the presence of temporal discounting. And what do I mean? We tend to place greater value on things when they are in proximity to our efforts. So something that I can achieve 2 months from now is going to be far more valuable to me in my mind than something that, well, if I work at it, I'll be able to achieve it 2 years from now. So if I'm missing a certain age with my kids that's magical so that I can be there for them when they're older, well, that motivation is going to wane over time. So we would need to pull resources from that person because they're an expert in who they are and why they want what they want more than we can be an expert as far as knowing that individual, so they can resolve their own resistance, resolve their own ambivalence, and we could co-create with them in control, them as the expert, their own way forward. Discord is where there's something we're doing that is provoking an antagonistic response. It's not the nature of the work or the goal or the value proposition in and of itself. It's the way that we're communicating. But resolving discord and resistance are fundamentals to coaching as well.
That's awesome. I really like those really clear definitions because you make it really simple. And I think a lot of trainers don't necessarily understand that what they say and how they say it to their clients can cause discord.
Especially when you're dealing with someone. Now, here's where this is great. Because the reason why it causes discord is because you might unwittingly demand that your client meet you where you are because you've seen this work before. You have a level of belief and a reference point that they don't have. And you are approaching this with conviction. They're approaching this with trepidation. And where that's good is one of the intrinsic principles of coaching is holding space. So that is what is emerging between the space of me and you, that my belief is greater than your doubt. Vanessa, it's okay that you don't completely believe in your ability right now because you're trying to do something you've never done before, which necessitates that you become someone you've never been before. And in that evolution, that process of becoming versus being, it's all right to have doubts. That's normal. I'm going to hold that space because I've done this with multiple other clients. I've gone the distance in this journey, and you can borrow some of my belief. My belief is greater than your doubt. And that's when I think about that. I think about Wilma Rudolph, who is still to this day probably goes down in history as one of the greatest female runners of all time. She was born as the 20th kid out of 22 kids in a poor family in rural Tennessee, and she was born premature. She, by the time she was 6 years old, had scarlet fever, double pneumonia. She spent the first 6 years of her life on the edge of death, and then she got polio, and she lost the entire use of one of her legs, so she was handicapped, and she remained handicapped until her teen years. And what happened was Ed Temple, who was the coach at her high school, talked her into, of all things, joining the track and field team, which is a really odd thing for a handicapped girl who doesn't have use of one of her legs to do. And she came in dead last in just about every race she ran. But her mother held space for her. Her mother's mentality was, you might not believe in your ability to get better, but I know you will. My belief is greater than your doubt. And she made her go through years and years of excruciatingly painful, arduous, and slow processes of physical therapy. And that physical therapy paid off not because of Wilma Rudolph's resolve, but her mother's resolve. But once she developed the ability to walk without the use of her braces, she no longer needed her mother's belief. She had borrowed it long enough to develop enough belief in herself. And when you think, well, here's a girl who was crippled and she joined her high school track and field team, she came in last place, but she completed the race she ran. It's like, wow, that's inspiring. This handicapped girl is actually able to complete an actual high school race. But what's even more inspiring is in 1960 in Rome, September 7th, she went down in history as being the greatest female runner of all time by winning 3 gold medals in one Olympic Games. That is extraordinary. And we talk about, wow, that was her dedication. That was her work ethic, her commitment. Yes, yes, yes. But just as much or even more of the credit goes to her mother for holding that space. And sometimes as a coach, we hold space for people. If you're coming from that, my belief is greater than your doubt. The other side of that is if that blocks you from being able to see where this individual is and what they need in the moment and how they see the world perceptually versus how you see the world, because your enthusiasm, as well-meaning as it might be, might come across as being dismissive, sympathetic versus empathetic, and invalidating. And that creates resistance. That creates discord.
This is something that's come up recently for me because I'm the person. I have belief. I'm all for you. I want to hold the space to give you that belief. And I think that's where a lot of trainers operate from a lot of the time. A lot of coaches operate from that space. What are some questions that coaches and trainers can ask themselves or potentially ask their clients or even individuals who might notice this of their coaches? What's a way to broach that with someone to help them gain their perspective of the client?
Okay. That's a beautiful question. There's a couple of principles. I think my belief is greater than your doubt is an operating principle of coaching. Another principle is inquiry before advocacy. And another principle is intention is more important than technique. And what that means is even before you, and developing coaching-based skills, if you see a talented coach working, it is excruciatingly difficult, the skill sets they've developed. And it really looks like the coach isn't doing anything at all. Like, what is this person even doing? They're just reflecting. Are they repeating? And really the client is doing most of the work. And if you're a coach and you're highly effective with your clients and you appear like you're not doing anything at all, it takes so much skill and hard work to appear that way. If you look like you're working really hard as a coach, it's probably not a skilled coach. And even before you get that level of skill around a technique or a model, even if you only changed your intention around coaching and you held a space of unconditional positive regard and the willingness to truly listen, well, let's go back to expectations, where there's a big divide between what the client is expecting and what the client's actually receiving. I think you brought that point up quite astutely, Vanessa. And when you say that, the analogy I think about is an exercise tubing, right? So let's say my left hand is expectation. My right hand is my actual experience, reality. And in between those two hands, I'm holding a piece of exercise tubing. Well, the further the distance my expectation goes from reality, what happens to the tubing? Greater stress and tension. So what do you want to do as the client? You want to alleviate stress and tension. So you're either going to try to compromise your expectations, or what's this current reality that's stressing me? I'm going to either fight it, I'm going to do nothing at all, or I'm going to silently quit at some point. It has nothing to do with my lack of drive or work ethic. I'm alleviating psychological tension because what I'm expecting and what's happening is causing me a lot of stress and confusion. Where if you thought to yourself, I wonder what this client expects, and just asking that question, Vanessa, tell me a little bit about why you chose to work with me rather than doing this on your own. What are your expectations? So when this goes the way you envision it going, tell me a story. Tell me a story about you 6 months from now, after being successful on this journey. What happened to you? What did you learn? What have you achieved? How are you different? What do you know 6 months from now as a result of that success that you don't currently know now? Well, tell me a story about that person 3 months from now. What about 3 days from now? What about 60 minutes from now? What does success look like over the next hour we're together? What happens? That a lot of times will inform you. And, a lot of people say things about coaching. And again, it's quite innocent, where coaching is about asking really good questions. No, it's not. Coaching is about asking authentic, sincere questions. It's what happens after the question in the client's response. It's not the question you ask. It's how the client responds, and your ability to listen, encapsulate, reflect, affirm, summarize, and direct. That really makes coaching masterful in a way that, again, bridges that gap between where that person is and where they want to be. So that's one example. Another example could be, tell me a story about when you were involved in the pursuit of something that was deeply important to you, and there were unexpected challenges that came up, and you didn't think you were going to make it. Yet, not only did you make it through, you succeeded. Tell me about that person. What are her strengths? What was her mindset? What were some of her characteristics? What did she learn from that time in her life? And how would some of those lessons be valuable now when you're once again in a similar situation, but you've been here before? Tell me that story and listen to it. Not just what are you saying? What do you mean? There's 3 levels when I'm reflecting. There's simplified reflections, or the words that you're using. So let's say you're telling me something and there's emphasis on a word, or there's a certain emotive response where you're like, okay, well, I was going to university at the time and it was really hard. And then my boyfriend at the time, it's like, wait, okay, boyfriend, your boyfriend at the time, I reflect that. You're probably going to go back and dig into what was the emotional content. Because you just, oh, my boyfriend at the time, there was emphasis. So that's the first level of reflection. The deeper level of reflection is not what you're saying, but what's the emotional content? You felt overwhelmed because someone else's needs were coming before yours. So you felt a bit of resentment mixed in with overwhelm, and that made that journey harder for you. Okay, and very often people will either go, no, that's not what I meant. What I really meant was, and you get further, or it's like, oh, that's exactly it. Yes. And you'll start to explain and expand upon that. And the deepest level is, what was the need? Not just the emotion felt, not just what are you saying, what's standing out to me as curious in the conversation, but what is the need? It's like what you really needed was someone to support you through that time for a change. And you're like, yes, I'm always giving support. I need support. Well, that's kind of important to know there, isn't it? So you see how the reflections are even more powerful than the question being asked. So those are the two questions. I mean, there's a lot of questions like, what do you want? What do you want most? What's absolutely most important for you? What happens when you get it? What happens if you don't get it? What's something that might get in the way? You're at a sticking point. What do you think might be happening right now? What do you think might be causing that? Like last week, I had a really bad day. Friday, I didn't make it to the gym. Okay, great. What was your best day? Tell me about your best day and what was different about that. What happens, not when you fall short of your expectations, what happens when you nail it? Tell me a little bit about that person. That's really important because these are attributes that aren't apparent to people sometimes. But if they can see what they can leverage when they're the best version of themselves, that is at the very least as important as what they need to learn from when they fall short of their expectations of themselves. Because when you're problem solving, it narrows your creative field of vision and it makes you look right at that problem as a target, which is useful. But I don't go there straight away because when you're asking people about successes and triumphs, that expands their mind's eye field of view and that deepens their level of creativity. Both are helpful, but what order do you ask these questions? Because when I'm getting into a conversation or a session, I'd like to expand your scope of possibility and creative problem solving before I narrow it a little bit, because I find that that's helpful for co-creation, collaboration with insight.
Awesome. These are really cool. I'm lucky. I've heard these questions before. I know where these stem from, and I've used them. I love these questions. They're amazing. Where are some places, some books, some resources that people can go to start to pick up these skills if they're not quite there yet?
Well, anything by James Prochaska. So he's one of the co-founders of the Trans-Theoretical Model of Change. Another place is David Cooper-Ryder, Appreciative Inquiry. Anything by him. DC and Ryan, Self-Determination Theory. That's the title of their text. You could pick that up. Motivational Interview, preferably the third iteration of that book by Walnick and Miller. So all of these are great resources. What I was just talking about, a little bit of it had come from motivational interviewing, looking at the best of that comes right out of appreciative inquiry.
Really cool. I always love how quickly you've got that detail. It's amazing to me. It's so good.
It comes from having a lot of friends and just sitting in a room reading a lot.
I also would direct people to head to your podcast because I love your bits and pieces. So check the show notes. I'll pop the links down for your resources as well, Bobby, because I love the way that you frame things as well, which is really cool. Here's a bit more of a personal question, if you'll allow it. What have been some of your greatest lessons as a coach, and how can that lesson impact trainers who are listening now?
I think I struggled in my career with the same thing that a lot of trainers struggle with in their career, where my passion overrode my ability to see where people were coming from. So I've been talking about coaching-based practices for at least 25 years. And in one of my first jobs, working as an educator within the health and fitness industry globally, it was back at NASM. I came on to NASM in the year 1999. We completely revamped NASM and built the foundations of what has now become the modern NASM in the year 2000. when Mike Clark and his crew came on to the company. And I was talking about coaching to a group of people that were brilliant physios, athletic trainers, people who had their PhD in human movement science. So I was hanging out in an apple orchard talking about oranges with passion. And what was interesting is Mike Clark at the time completely understood where I was coming from and why I was coming from this particular perspective. But we were at a point in the fitness industry where a lot of the health club chains that we grew to work with, they were having conversations with us like, okay, you're talking about coaching-based customer service. You're talking about driving PT revenues. We have 110% turnover of trainers. Now, how's that even possible? How do you have 110? You have 100% and that's it. Well, what that meant is we hire 10 trainers, 11 quit. And a big part of this is they don't have a stable structure to know what to do with somebody when they show up at 9 a.m. in the morning. If you could help us reduce our trainer attrition, that would solve so many problems for us. And what we landed on was, okay, what's needed is a structured progressive program design model, OPT. We need to take a look in a duplicatable way, in a way where you don't need 12 PhDs to train somebody on what are you looking for ideally in movement and what's actually happening, right? Knowledge of results versus knowledge of performance, going back to that again. And so we came out with these very specific strategies to solve one problem. If we started talking about solving 3, 4, 5 problems, people would be confused. We would have the opportunity to solve 0. So a lot of times I could have stepped back and noticed. Now, I was the guy they always kicked out of the office. Not like, get out, you can't stay here. But I would go move into our accounts. Like I would go move to the UK. I would move to the East Coast. I would just live in the accounts. And coaching was a great way to take all the pieces of the business from the management, the leadership perspective, the sales, the service perspective, and the NASM perspective and go, well, here's how it all works seamlessly. That was great. But when I got back into the office, I insisted on speaking German when everybody else spoke French. Not really, but that's the analogy. I wasn't speaking the same language. Know who's in front of you, meet them where they need to be met, not where you need to be met. Earlier on in my career, I had such a strong writing reflex that I thought I could fix people. And I thought there's a right way of living and training and believing and a wrong way. Of course, the wrong way was the antithesis of how I lived and what I thought. My way was obviously the right way because what the hell? I'm living on my own in a basement studio apartment at 18 years old. I know everything. And what I started to realize is my clients were so much smarter than me in so many ways. And being a great trainer was not necessarily about knowing more stuff. I mean, because I was the type of trainer where you would ask me a question and I would just grab onto you and talk to you about the Krebs cycles, moment arm, fiber type distribution. And half the time you just asked me, hey, I'm new in the gym. Do you know where the toilet is? And I thought, this is my opportunity. I'm just going to unload on someone. And, nobody was like, wow, this guy's so smart. I'm so impressed. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And know who you're talking to, because the clients that I was lecturing and chastising, owned multiple businesses. They sent kids to university. They lived in big houses. They weren't born into money. They clearly were capable of producing results in their life. If they were struggling in this one area, that was job security. That didn't mean that they were less than me as a human being. Listen and lead with empathy and unconditional positive regard, because that will build more bridges 99% of the time than it builds barriers.
That's awesome. My favorite thing that you said there was no one cares how much you know until they know that you care. That's so true. And we see it again and again. And it's really interesting when you think about the influencer craze that we have in terms of people selling, random products and other bits and pieces, majority of people believe that they care about the outcomes of themselves and of the people that they're selling to, and they don't care what they know. It's a really interesting way that I think Instagram influencers are able to sell and utilize their products really well, because they're coming at it from a completely different angle, whereas people in the industry who think they know a lot, who have the science or maybe the research behind their product and they truly believe in what they do, always try to sell it from this is the way to do it, right? This is how you should do it.
When somebody is self-referential as their main unique selling proposition, you are dealing with ego, not expertise. There are some influencers that are incredible. I know the word influencer has sometimes negative connotations, deservedly so, but there are a lot of people who are talking about stuff on the internet, and it's not limited to this individual. I'm just random people popping into my head. Perry Nicholson gives out for free incredible information generously. He's been on my show. I've been on his show. You might want to consider having him on your show. He's great.
He's awesome. I love his stuff.
So then you have people like that, and then you have these fuckwits that are saying like blueberries and what time you eat them is the reason why you're fat. Look, I don't like, there's a lot, like there are so many nuances and variables that go into the obesity epidemic. I doubt it's the blueberries that are to blame. So if somebody's like, look at me, I am freaking amazing, they're probably not. If somebody's message is, look at you, you can potentially be amazing, and here's some resources, they probably are.
It's a nice little tip there. I like it. We're looking good. Okay, last couple of questions. How you feeling? You good?
I'm okay.
I love the quick fire with you. This is so good.
I don't know, 2 questions in, I might gas out and just wake me up. I'll keep going. It's all right.
Bit of a time difference happening here if you're listening locally in Australia, but that's good. So what are some things that you would love to see in the health and fitness industry in the next 5 years?
David Barton gym design everywhere. It's just beautiful. It's just aesthetically is just so pleasing. I think I said it before. I would like to see more of coaching as a tool to be utilized. Now, understand this. Not coaching is a super valuable tool, but it is not the tool. There are times when instruction and teaching is what is appropriate. It's what the client is going to respond to. But there are other times when coaching is what's needed and where you're going to get the greatest level of responsiveness and where you're going to help the client develop the greatest level of capacity. So as a tool, I'd like to see coaching, but empirical-based coaching. Not like, well, as a coach, I don't tell my clients what they want to hear. I tell stop, because right there, you're telling your clients a whole bunch of stuff. You're not coaching. You're preaching, you're instructing, you're training, and maybe what you're doing is valuable, but it's not coaching. So I would like to see more structure, standardization, more pathways in that respect. I think it's happening already. And I think that, because right now I work in a different domain. I work with school districts. I work with emergency first responders. I work with a company that serves sheet metal workers, police, fire. So there's a different type of audience, but it falls under the wider umbrella of well-being or wellness. And I would like to see a lot more of that incorporated into health and fitness industry because it considers the whole person. And my very definition of wellness is when you collaborate with someone to identify what their highest values are, what gives them the deepest sense of purpose. Now, let me define purpose. Purpose is when you act upon what you value most. And when you express that in the world, it contributes to the lives of people around you. That's purpose. And once you identify that purpose, how do you optimize the physical, emotional, mental, environmental, social aspects of your life that allow you to be fully immersed in the fulfillment of that purpose? So you have greater fulfillment and quality of life in the ways that matter most to you. That is well-being. That's the wellness industry to me. And I think the fitness industry needs a little bit of that, but it might branch off into two different industries. And you might have a professional that can walk in between both of those industries.
That's cool. I see the branching. I see the change, the shift since COVID. And COVID sped it up 100%.
COVID and Wim Hof, I think. Yeah.
Single-handedly freezing people into wellness. Last question, because we're talking about wellness and we've talked about coaching. What do you do for yourself in terms of training and in terms of wellness practices that are really meaningful to you now, that have maybe previously that have shaped you into what you are?
Now, when you say shape me into what I am, is that an insult? Are you having a go at me?
Never ever.
The best I can. For me, this was it. Obviously, it was exercise that not only changed my life, it saved my life. Being a presenter, like getting to a hotel at 1 a.m, waking up at 5 for your next presentation, you're going to sacrifice sleep there. That's nothing for me to be proud of, but that's just the way it is. Diet has been a big part of that, but mostly surrounding myself with what makes me feel most fulfilled and happy, identifying work that is deeply meaningful and people that are deeply meaningful and engaging in that. Because when you really want to talk about wellness and well-being, happiness and life satisfaction and well-being is directly connected to one another. And they have a mutually supportive relationship. Your level of physical fitness profoundly affects your level of health, physiologically, mental health, and vice versa. But you also have to look at, the Harvard study, let's say. That's a good example. 1938, the longest running longitudinal study ever conducted by Harvard. They took, I believe it was 824 people or 700. No, it was about 824 people. And they split them up into two groups. So half of those people came from the poorest, most underprivileged neighborhoods in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. The other half of the people in that study were some of the most affluent and privileged people in Massachusetts. Former President John F. Kennedy was a member of that study in that group. So they wanted to rule that out and examine what's the difference between socioeconomics. And there are a lot of factors in socioeconomics that play into it. It is significant, but what they found is the single most contributing factor to happiness, which is a massive supporter of health, well-being, was the quality of people's relationships, regardless of socioeconomic status. And we see what happens on the opposite end of that. So the ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, when you start to get above a level 4, so there's 10 questions, and each question points to a specific incident of adverse childhood experience, and people usually have multiple compounding. And after a certain point, the chance of developing a life-threatening metabolic-based disease increases by 10 to 11 times. And here's what's fascinating. Even in people who are doing the quote-unquote right things, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I eat healthy, I exercise, well, their risks go up exponentially as well. So it's not a character issue there. Something is being altered biologically. And we forget this. We forget that we're highly integrated. It's impossible to be optimally healthy and miserably unhappy. That those two things just don't go together. What do you love? What and who do you love? And how often can you engage in that? If you love music, if you love beauty, if you love learning, how often do you allow yourself to go and live there, even if it's just 15 minutes a day? Who's the most important people in your life? Are they coming second to things that, when you're on your deathbed, aren't going to matter much, and you're going to be filled with regret because it was those people that mattered? Bronnie Ware, another great book, she wrote The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Bronnie Ware was a palliative care nurse in Melbourne, Australia, and you just I think I was in love with her by chapter 2, actually, just reading this beautiful soul and the thoughts in her head. And she said that when she was in palliative care, there were these 5 regrets that in some way, shape, or form, they were voiced differently, but it came down to, I really wish I had the courage to live my own values and pursue my own dreams rather than living under the expectations of other people. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And I doubt the people who are saying, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, were people who loved their job and they loved what they did. I doubt it was those people that were saying that. That means something else. And the third thing was, I wish I had expressed myself more. Like the people in your life that you really love, just like bring them, tell them, hey, I love you. Like, don't wait. Sometimes like, oh, they know. No, it's not just in the knowing, it's in the expressing. So like tell your spouse, if you're in love with someone else's spouse, maybe don't make that call straight away. Think about that. Number 4 was, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I spent more time with the people that I chose. I mean, family, sometimes family are the people you love more than anything. Sometimes family are the people that we got to tolerate during the holidays. And it's like, let's just get through this and we don't have to see them for another year. Friends, they choose you and you choose them. And you're really good friends, enrich your lives in the way most things won't. And the 5th regret, I wish I just let myself be happy. I worried about so many things and so little of them actually came to fruition. I spent all that time, and I'm a very neurotic person. So I'm from Brooklyn, New York. We're just designed that way. So that really resonates with me. But if those are the things you regret most, what will you be most grateful for? It's probably the exact opposite frame of those things. And that falls into well-being. When you do that, I was talking to Andrew Daniel. He's the author of the Golden Nautilus Award-winning book, Awaken to Your True Self. And he said, when you're living your highest values, you show up as an invitation, as a possibility for other people. And I think that's where becoming is more important than being, because there's so much more possibility in that space. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that resonates so much with me, and just the journey as well that I've been on for the last couple of years through COVID and through the fitness industry, and seeing its change and seeing people's livelihoods at risk, and then seeing the clients who I've continued to train, seeing the stress and the challenge. And when you're living in that stress, that constant stress, constant on the go state, there's not a lot of space for wellness. There's not a lot of space for well-being. You show up and that's it. You know what I mean? There's not a lot else that you can do.
And our society is fairly fragmented post-COVID. I mean, while we're talking about connection and how well-being is connected to connectedness, Sebastian Junger wrote the book Tribe. And, he talks about people who were living through World War II in London. And they were in the London Underground trying to avoid the bombings. Now, people whose country was being attacked in the middle of World War II arguably were suffering through much greater adversity than we were, sitting home and watching Netflix. Yet, what he reports, and there's a lot of other factors, that he was reporting that even though people were scared and there was a lot of emotional duress, there was very low incident of what we would call mental health crisis, because people were so bonded together, they needed each other. There was purpose. We held space for one another. It wasn't just about me. I couldn't survive if it's just about me. And there was this strong human-to-human community connectivity. Now, there's a lot of, you saying that there wasn't a lot of people that were in these mental institutions, I guess would be the word for back then, but they might have cleared the way for wounded people to come. So there's a lot of factors you don't know, but when you look at the emotional and psychological duress of COVID versus other times that were arguably much, much worse, what was the factor? We were disconnected from each other in real meaningful ways. I mean, yeah, Zoom, it's not really the same thing, is it? I love having this conversation with you. I've been in the same room with you. It's much better. And I think we really learned what happens when we're divorced from another. I think individualism is necessary in a culture, but so is a communal culture. And I think when you over-index one way or the next, you start to have blind spots. And I think one of the things we saw is you need to kind of be in the middle. I want to go out and be incentivized to grow and create and put my ingenuity to work so I can be more, become more. So I'm more valuable when I come back to the community. When you look at every single story that has ever been told, the thread through which the tapestry of religion, society, and human history is interwoven, it's the hero's journey. It's about someone who reluctantly embarks on a journey, responds to the call, the quest, because their status quo, life as it is so disruptive, it's more painful not to take action than to take action. And in trying to restore equilibrium or restore normalcy to their life, they confront so many challenges that in overcoming those challenges, they themselves are transformed and they can then return home. But when they return home, it's not about them. It's about saving, someone from the tower, about slaying a dragon, protecting your village, bringing resources, food, ending a famine, saving the village. It's always about how you become a valuable member of the community. And I think that every single story that has constructed every aspect of our society to which our psyches are inseparably connected, if it's talking about the same thing, it must be pretty important.
That's such a good thought to end on, because when you look at it personally, anyone can be the hero of their own story. And you just have to understand what the outcome is that you're looking for in the long run, what your values are, and what's meaningful to you, and how you want to appear for them and how you want to appear for yourself. And then you can overcome those challenges that appear throughout your life. It's really cool.
Thank you for this.
Thank you. Such a good chat. I mean, I could keep you on for another several hours. I won't do that just because I know that your time is precious and you're a busy human.
Nodding off in between questions.
I'd be really hangry by then, so you'd probably get like a really aggressive version of me because I haven't eaten yet. Well, Bobby, I'm going to leave it there. We're going to direct our listener to the show notes. Check you out because I love your work, what you've done for the industry. I appreciate you and your time so much. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being a part of our podcast community. We work hard to create content that we hope you enjoy and find valuable. If you haven't already, we would be honored if you would consider subscribing and following us on your favorite platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. We truly appreciate your support and we can't wait to continue to grow and connect with you through our podcast.